Something I love to do during each one of my campaigns is come up with a campaign theme and then make sure that all of my marketing ideas, my visuals, every single creative idea that I have or sales activity that I come up with that has to do with this campaign all tie together under that theme. And I love getting creative ideas for campaigns for things outside of my direct niche or industry. So I really came up with this idea when I saw that there are brands out there that sell the same old product in different ways throughout the year. So for example, I think of a brand like Skims that sells literally the same shapewear, lingerie, underwear, undershirts, undergarments, all of the things. And it's not always that they're coming up with new pieces. Sometimes they do for exclusive drops or holidays or things like that. But most of the time they're selling the same product. They're just finding new ways to sell that product, whether it's with collaborating with other people, finding again new visuals to make sure that we stay interested, whether it's seasonal themes, so many different things in that way. And sometimes even though you might not have bought with the 3 other campaign themes, there's one campaign theme that will stand out to you and engage you to buy. I think a lot about how often campaigns are just being held, how often we're consuming things online. And so I do think campaign themes are the future when it comes to creating launches that are memorable outside of just the direct offer. I also think that campaign themes are a great way to keep your offer fresh. They're a great way to keep your offer relevant and a great way, again, to keep it top of mind for the people during your launch. I find that most people that even aren't interested in buying for the campaign season that we're in are paying enough attention that they usually buy into other services or other things that we're offering. I also think that when you have a campaign theme, you can solely focus on the quality of the assets you're producing and not so much on the quantity. A lot of times when we focus on quantity during a campaign, the goal is let's just get it out there, and if enough people see it, they'll be interested, versus let's get quality pieces of marketing out there that are going to get people's attention, that can re-engage our audience. And ultimately, if we think about how algorithms work, marketing that is quality, that's creative, that's going to get people engaging and interested, that's what's actually going to perform. And this is why we see quantity pieces that really focus on, I would say, like low engagement. And that's why a lot of times when we see pieces focused on quantity, we see that they don't even reach the audiences that we need to convert because they're not creative, they're not bringing any new attention in. I also think that campaign themes can really draw people in outside of just the offer itself and help focus on emotion, help focus on identity, help focus on like kind of the factors that you can't necessarily say through direct copy and messaging. And instead it's kind of like, let me just show them. So I want to talk about different launch themes or campaign themes that you can come up with before your next campaign. And then also from there, I want to share with you kind of what is the process to teasing that out and what does it look like in terms of marketing assets when you do come up with a campaign theme. So I want to focus on campaign themes that are direct to the coaching, consulting, service provider industry, anyone that is a service-based entrepreneur, but these can definitely be used for other niches that might just need a little bit more tweaking. The first thing that I think about is transformation-based themes, and I'm not necessarily thinking about the end result that has to do with numerical. I think a lot about like the befores and afters of somebody's transformation once they're working with you inside of your offer. So for example, I think about like burnt out to booked out, right? If that's going to be your theme, thinking about why is it relevant? Why is it timely for your audience and who you're launching to? Thinking about what marketing ideas can you come up with? What are visual, ties that you can create in terms of this specific theme? The second thing that I think about is more identity-based themes. So this has a lot to do with like belonging and a vibe and an aesthetic that you're trying to set. I love doing those for my specific campaigns just because I feel like they're very on brand for me. So for example, in my last campaign, I guess an identity theme that I did was become the only option. And so everything that I created in terms of my marketing was centered around being the only option. What's that feeling like? What's the exclusivity like? How do you behave? How do you market? How do you show up? And that really all tied to creating a one-of-a-kind rebrand, having a one-of-a-kind unique visual experience for your audience that makes them believe that you are the only option for them. And so again, everything that I created as part of this campaign, my launch event, the series of marketing episodes that I did, I talked about my own transformation, my own journey, right? All had to do with kind of becoming like just like everybody else to becoming only option. Another theme that you can tie into is more seasonal or cultural themes. Again, this has to do with whatever your niche is or whatever service that you're selling, if it makes sense. But I think about, like hot girl summer, for example. There are so many different things that tie back into that. I have seen like rich girl summer. I've seen like a wealthy girl summer. I've seen like different variations of that. And so it's usually tied into a certain time of year. I think a lot about not just seasonal, but it could be like back to school, it could be the new year, it could be Valentine's, it could be so many different things that you can tie into that theme. I will also say sometimes those are, a little bit more predictable. And so finding ways that you can make them extra unique for you and your brand is key. Another theme that I see is usually related around challenge or achievement or results. Now, this is where the numerics, and if you're doing a 30-day challenge, if you're helping somebody make their first 10K, if you're helping somebody lose 50 pounds, whatever, there are themes all around that. And then it's making sure that you are doubling down again on what that means, the significance, the impact, all of it. So when we think about how to launch with your campaign theme, number one, I really like to think about what is obviously the messaging that you can tie back to your campaign theme. So when we did Become the Only Option, it was really important for us to have all of our messaging tied to that, kind of the launch event tied to that, making sure that we were positioning the offer as a way to help them become the only option, thinking about marketing ideas, content topics, everything again tied to that theme. Number two is visuals. So with the visuals, you can kind of go two different routes. So for me, I'm a big advocate of making sure that you have 1 or 2 brand shoots that you can do throughout the year. So depending on how long your shoot is, you should be able to get at least 6 months worth of content, footage, etc., thinking about those things in mind. So when we did our last brand shoot, I knew that I wanted to have our offer tied behind an identity-based theme. And I knew that I wanted to portray my identity as a creative director, my insights, my knowledge, etc., in a specific way. So we were able to do that with photos. If you are someone that doesn't necessarily lean heavy towards the photos, there is definitely other ways that you can tie a visual component with that. And that is honestly with branding. And so this is where having a core rebrand for your business comes into play. It's not just about thinking about the website and the photos and the colors and things like that during launch day. It's seeing how it can benefit you even afterwards when you are coming up with a campaign theme like right now. So something you can think about is, what is a brand identity for this kind of offers a brand that you can create that still ties back to your main offer, but gives it its own unique personality. Ideally, because your launch theme is tied to that specific personality, you can probably play with different color combinations, different fonts. Again, finding a creative way to do this while this is still on brand for you and your business. We don't want it to be like every time you launch a campaign, it feels like a completely new offer. It should feel fresh and exciting, not necessarily something brand new and outside of the box to where it's almost unrecognizable. This is also kind of where I see people make a mistake of just repeating the visuals over and over again. Even with an amazing campaign theme, even with new messaging, even with new deliverables, people are still not going to see the benefit of all of those things if your visuals, your branding, your photos, etc., just feel like a copy for the 3rd year in a row or for the 10th campaign in a row. Next is obviously content ideas and marketing topics. So for example, when we came up with the Become the Only Option, another way that you're able to do this is thinking about series or ideas, or maybe it's a segment on your podcast, maybe it's an email series, maybe it's a Reels theme that you decide to do just specifically for this campaign. So as an example, something that we did to kind of spice up our befores and afters was doing these like rebrand briefs, where we actually kind of designed it to be like this folder, and what you get to see is essentially where the client was at before they were the only option, and the decision making behind that, and the visual choices that they had made, which really helped them blend in, versus after working with us, what was the strategy, kind of what was the thinking behind the colors or the photos or the creative direction, the website, and how that positions them as the only option. So again, it's taking something and just putting your own creative spin, tying it back to the launch theme, and finding a new way to make it exciting. That really brought in quite some traction for us versus just posting portfolio work. And I even noticed some other people in our industry kind of starting to replicate that. And then obviously we want to think about the buyer's journey with a new theme, with new messaging, with new positioning. There's obviously going to be consideration in terms of what is your audience going to think about? Is there hesitations towards this? So for example, when it comes to the only option, we definitely had clients say, do we have to be at a specific revenue goal for this? What does the only option look like? I am someone that's picky. How do you come up with these things? How do you make it unique to each client? Also thoughts around like, I'm too shy, I'm too introverted, I'm too old, I just became a new mom. All of these are objections around them thinking that being the only option is just one look. And we had to do a lot of education on how, no, this is completely customizable to you as the client and where that comes in. So finally, to come up with your own campaign theme, like I said, trying to figure out from the theme kind of angles that I shared earlier, where do you kind of gravitate towards, what's on brand for you, for your business, thinking about what's timely for your audience right now, what have people been saying, what are reasons people haven't been joining your service or offer. Also thinking about any new objections that have come up that you can actually debunk with your theme overall. So for us, a signature look was definitely something that was a piece of conversation during our entire campaign. It was why people decided to work with us in terms of our like creative customization process. So we know that that's something that we definitely want to double down on next time. I also would like for you to think, what is the transformation? What is kind of the energy that you want behind this launch? What is the emotion that you're trying to convey? What is the identity that you want to step into? What is the identity that you want people to have, even just witnessing this launch? And obviously, when you come up with a campaign theme, just sit down with it and just kind of try to come up with like 10 ideas really quickly in terms of where your brain goes. What is the creative way that you can elevate this? And also thinking about like, what are the routine kind of sales activities that I do that I can kind of take a spin on and kind of do a different creative take to make sure it aligns with my campaign theme. So that is definitely one of the key things that you need to make sure that you have your next record-breaking campaign. Make sure that it's all cohesive, all tied together, and can produce your best launch yet.